We obviously so value your time coming in from the other side of planet Earth.
The other side of the world, yeah.
So
The exact opposite time zone.
about 12 hours exactly, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yes.
we're having a late night in New York City, and couldn't have done it with anybody else, honestly, to start. This is our first late night interview, Scott. So thank you
Really?
so much.
Wow. You're
So
in the city that never sleeps, after all.
that is right. You know, after COVID, it started to take little naps, little cat naps.
Yeah.
It started to worry about getting its hours. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
that
Yes.
moniker has
Yeah.
been tested, but I think it's starting to come back a little bit. People are fiending for the night a little bit in New York again.
I think it's fine. I love New York. I always enjoy my time there.
Ashley, you want to take it? Who do we have here beaming in from the other side of the world today? Who do we got?
We've got Scott Neeson from Cambodia Children's Fund and Phnom Penh. I think I'm saying that correctly.
How'd she do, Scott? Was that all right?
It's close. Phnom Penh. Phnom Penh is what I think most people would call it.
Okay. Okay. All right. Cool. And, you know, Scott, when I,
Yes.
a couple of weeks ago, did my first journey through the website for your organization, it is a great website. I think it does a beautiful job illustrating your story, which is incredible.
Yes.
And, you know, we want to be sensitive because, you know, it's been how many years since you first
21 years.
21 years.
21 years since I arrived here, and never thought it'd be more than, say, 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
You know, I'm going to get back to Hollywood and get my big fat salary back, but never quite worked out that way.
Yes. Yes. So the story's been out there. So I'm just going to really quickly summarize it. I might ask you to kind of take us to a moment just so we can kind of connect to the visual and the emotion. But I do encourage people to look at the website, to engage with other interviews you've done. I don't want to just lean on, well, you know, our audience hasn't heard it. You know, the internet exists. There's all sorts of information out there. But the notion is, the story is, and it is compelling and aligns directly with our platform in a lot of ways. You were a big movie producer. You know,
well, I was a creative exec. I was a suit more than a producer. A lot of producers would get upset.
Oh, fair enough.
I was president. As president of 20th Century Fox International, I don't have a lot of creative bones, but I dealt with a lot of the filmmakers and the stars and things. Yeah, it was a big job. It was clearly it was a big revenue because it was everything outside of North America. So it was both very complicated. We have 26 offices around the world back then, and it was complicated, and there was a lot of money coming in. And so yeah, it was a bit of it was certainly very business focused, very corporate focused. And on the other side, dealing with creative, but sadly, never produced a film.
You weren't living like a Bob Evans fantasy, like.
Oh, no. I don't know. I actually met Bob a couple of times. I'm not sure he was either.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Totally funny. I mean, should I push you a little further for a Bob story, or did you just allude to the fact that maybe the myth is?
We had a fundraiser back in the days when Sumner Redstone, he was chairman of Viacom and CBS and MTV. What else? Paramount Studios is the main one. And he'd invite Bob over quite a bit, and Bob showed up there.
Sweet.
He's a legend. I mean, I felt the earth move when the two of them were in the room.
I bet. Yeah. And obviously so many great films, and you know, Scott, you too. And, you know, people can go Google it, but really a bunch of huge movies from the Titanic and Braveheart, and I believe like the X-Men movies, or maybe a couple of the Star Wars films.
Some of the Star Wars,
yeah. I mean, so you're talking, you know, huge movies, and clearly played an instrumental role in a lot of ways. But the crux of this larger narrative is, years ago, you took a visit to Cambodia and came into contact with the situation on the ground as it pertains to the level of poverty and the kind of behavior of people living in extreme poverty, often rifling through garbage heaps, landfills. We're talking often women and children, barely scraping together what might be the equivalent of $1 a day. And this struck you. This perhaps changed you. And though it maybe took a little while, as you just mentioned, to attempt to recalibrate, or you couldn't really escape from a deep feeling of what seems like now, certainly in hindsight, a responsibility to step in and engage. So, the stories out there, I do encourage everybody to kind of check it out in different spaces. But what I personally would like, and Scott, if you could do this for us, is paint the picture for us of that first moment. What brought you outside? Was it just a getaway, a vacation? What brought you there? And then really, could you paint the picture of the first moment and how that made you feel?
Yes. Well, to start with, I finished my contract at 20th Century Fox, and I was moving over to Sony Pictures. I signed a contract there. It's been a very intense 10 years with Fox. I wanted to get a break, have a hiatus. I wanted to see the Buddhist sites. With Indonesia's got Borobudur, Thailand, of course, Myanmar, and Cambodia has Angkor Wat, which is a remarkable place. So that was the plan. On the way to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, a friend's friend showed me some of the problem areas, mainly on the riverfront, the street where a lot of the tourists are. And I thought it'd be nice to be able to donate some of my salary, but it was a mess. Because the tourists are there, the kids know how to wrangle money. The kids weren't getting the money themselves. It was the people that were running them, parents who were gambling, substance abuse, and it was all very disillusioning. So after I complained, a local gave me an address to go and check. Basically a place where, that's a terrible thing to say, was a great deal of suffering and there's no one there to help. I thought it was going to just be a very poor village, but it was actually the garbage dump of Phnom Penh, municipal garbage dump of Phnom Penh. And at the time, there were nearly 1,500 children on the dump, those under the age of 18. It was terrible. I mean, it was just such an awful, awful place. The smell, obviously. The heat was unbearable because it's a very hot country. Because the garbage creates methane burns, and so the ground below is often burning, and you've got to be very careful where you step. So it was, 120, 140 degrees with the ground below, and I'd stepped in a few of those areas where it was a crust basically, and it was like a lava made of molten garbage below. I've still got some of the scars of those too. So it was a terrible, terrible place, and it wasn't just the kids were working there. A number of them would sleep there as well. They'd either been orphaned and made their way there, or the parents had left them there because it was probably the single place where a child could make enough money to survive, to get money for food and water. And a really terrible situation there. And as I say, I mean, I put myself in the position. I wanted to see a place where I could help, and there wasn't anyone else there. In retrospect, that was where it became so compelling, I think. The other piece too, which is a big motivator for me, was I was standing there and a child was walking by, I think 8, 9 years old, and they're all covered in all of their clothes. I only see the eyes. They couldn't tell it was a boy or a girl. They wear everything at once because, first of all, the heat's unbearable, and of course, there's no place to leave your stuff if you don't have a house, if you're living there. And this child, turned out it was a girl. She came up, and I was prepared for kids to ask for money, and I could be stoic and say no. It doesn't really do a lot. But she came up and she said, "Som tau ring," which is, "Can you get me into school?" And that was a very hard request to deny. And rocked my world for a moment there. It really did. The child had a foresight to see that getting off the garbage dump, the only way to do it long term, of course, was to get an education. And so that day, with a translator who was working for the government, someone I trusted, we found the mother who was also working there. And we took a walk down to some very basic shelters down below. And over the next hour and a half, we had rented rented a room, basically. It's a small room, but it had a squat toilet there. It's $15 a month. I paid 6 months in advance. It wasn't a whole lot. And arranged for my friend who when I went back to Los Angeles, I'd send him the money and he would check in on the family, drop off some basic food, give the mother a stipend, and check the attendance record of the child to make sure she was in school. And of course, the younger sibling was in a very bad way. She had tuberculosis, so they'd also get her to hospital to get treated there. And it went, if you're in a corporate world, it's a matter of problem solving step by step. When I went back to my hotel, my very flash hotel back then, it really struck me, not in an egocentric way, but I never in my wildest dreams thought I could solve, never thought in my wildest dreams I could change the trajectory of a single person's life, a child's life like that. And I sat and I pondered the fact that this child, her future would be totally different. I mean, it would never have to be in the landfill. By all likelihood, in my mind anyway, she would complete school and get good jobs. And of course, the cycle of poverty would be broken. And I couldn't get out of my mind. And of course, the next question was, if I can do it for her, I can do it for some others. And that really haunted me for a bit. So next day I went down there again and other kids would ask for the same, word had got out, and I would do basically the same thing. And I mean, part of it is an immense sense of self-satisfaction about this has been done. These kids are there. I was very naive too. It was a lot more difficult than I thought. But kids coming into school and being able to support the families in the most basic way. Certainly, I didn't have a cash shortage. That was a big motivator for me.
You know, Scott, if I'm not mistaken, and it might not have been that very first girl, but in doing some research for this, is it that very first girl who has since graduated from higher education and is now actually doing
degree in finance? She's got a degree in finance and economics, and she's doing fabulously well.
So great. So
yes.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Scott, we're going to keep diving in, but you know, when I said earlier about being aligned, obviously, you know, we're here in New York and doing a lot of different things, but the name of the show is Good Standing. And, you know, part of the notion of this otherwise administrative term, good standing, is that when you do something good for somebody, when you do something potentially transformative for somebody, that feeling you get, and you mentioned it's not an egocentric thing, but that feeling you get, that reward beyond the monetary or beyond the material.
It's a legacy to begin with. You have your legacy there. That particular person you're helping, if it's sustainable, that you've got a legacy right there. And there's a lot of joy. I mean, most people and philosophers say that the true sense of happiness and joy is by helping someone else. And I certainly found that firsthand.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't want to veer away too much from what the org is doing, but in certain ways, obviously, Cambodia generally has dealt with a lot of political turmoil, a lot of really intense moments, to say the least. And, you know, as I was really diving into sort of just the long and immediate history of Cambodia, I had to reckon with the fact that every country has its darkness and its, you know, not so great leaders. And, you know, we're here in the United States, and I was just thinking about, you know, we've dealt with, when I say we, I mean America as a place, its history has dealt with genocide or perpetuated it, or, you know, things like slavery and stuff like that. So certainly America itself, its hands aren't clean historically. And I just want to be respectful of Cambodia too, just to recognize that it's not a situation where, you know, folks in the West are looking at this place and pointing a finger. Certainly some individuals historically deserve criticism beyond criticism, but obviously the international situation over the years has been complex. Just what's happened in that region, you know, in terms of neighboring
Cambodia
countries.
was extreme. I mean, Cambodia's most extreme example, you know, spillover from the Vietnam War in the 70s. Pol Pot had the Khmer Rouge. They took over the country in 1975, and it was one of the worst genocides of my generation. Over the 3.5 years, nearly 20 to 25% of the population were killed in such a short period, put into the killing fields, tortured. Anyone that had any kind of education, wore glasses, worked for the government, spoke a second language, professionals, they were killed. They were the first ones to go. And everyone was moved out of the cities. They all had to work in the fields, regardless of age. They evacuated Phnom Penh. And at the end of it, in 1979, there was only, goodness, I think there was only 4 or 5 doctors in the whole country. You lost an intellectual structure there. You lost the banks were demolished. There was no currency. It was a disaster. And following that, the civil war went on between Khmer Rouge and the Vietnamese government installed themselves then. Now, the issue we see today, and the issue I face on a daily basis, is Khmer Rouge, they split up families. They wanted to break up the family, get back to year zero. So family members were sent to different parts of the country. In 1979, when it stopped, a lot of the children then didn't know where they lived, and they spent years trying to search for parents. And I can't imagine, that's the stuff of nightmares, I think, not knowing which village you lived in, not knowing how to get in touch with your parents. But it's valid today because those children are now the parents, and there's a terrible, terrible rate of post-traumatic stress, and it's I can see it in many, many aspects. Now, this is not all Cambodia. I picked the area around the garbage dump because it was the most damaged. And it wasn't just poverty. It was a place people would go to when they're indebted due to ill health. They had substance abuse issues, mental health issues. Mothers, fathers had run away, left their children there. So I think it was the most dysfunctional, crisis-ridden community, certainly that I'd ever seen. It's not all of Cambodia, but I sure picked the center of the universe in terms of suffering and dysfunction and broken structure.
Yeah.
So that bit of post-traumatic stress, it took a while to get used to the fact that people would do things that I'd always believed were not possible. I mean, particularly a mother leaving a child on the garbage dump. The mother would find a new husband, marry. The new father didn't want some other man's children, so that off they go, leaving these kids there. And it's not a judgment on Cambodian people here. It's only the trauma that people in the Steung Meanchey area, that's the district, work. A lot of people there come straight out of prison. In most cases, they had debt that they couldn't handle. And most of the debt was because someone got very sick. So it was a specific area where the remnants of the Khmer Rouge in the 70s was really reverberating there. Very unpredictable personalities there, especially after drinking, other substance abuse. So it was very volatile.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, lasting post-traumatic stress, passed down, imprinted, inherited, in many ways, quite literally permeating not just the soil, but in the molten crust, and the metaphorical molten crust of it all. But
and it's still first and second generation. That's the difficult part. I mean, it is effectively every parent, anyone over the age of, say, 45 or 50,
right,
survived Khmer Rouge, and that was their childhood.
Yeah, and Scott, it was
There's very little in the understanding of traditions or the family structure, heritage. Of course, there's no one there to do the storytelling. It's gone.
Yeah, a lot of erasure, and I was just going to say, like the remnants of Pol Pot going directly up until I think concretely like 1997 or something. It's not ancient history.
3 elections came along. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, with this obviously problematic history reverberating through the present, trauma, all these things, but Cambodia also specifically at a lot of these gorgeous temples has this incredible spiritual history or sort of meditative history. And I'm just thinking about how often these things are neighbors or operating simultaneously, existing simultaneously. And I'm just sort of going back to this notion of connecting to helping. And I'm just wondering also, along with the history or simultaneously with the history and the present moment, without like hitting you over the head with sort of obvious dogmatic religious notions or anything like that, but we're talking about like Buddhism and Hinduism also existing along with the sort of erasure of religion with certain sort of political tropes and classic sort of communist erasure tropes. And I'm using communism maybe a little broadly here, but what does it look like in terms of how people are engaging spiritually? I know a lot of nonprofit work often has a sort of missionary sort of component, a sort of like almost like a colonial element. But just on the ground for you, what you see with the historical context, what are you seeing there in terms of how people sort of connect to a sense of like day-to-day spirituality and how that exists with their practical everyday lives and just notions of survival?
Yeah, well, the religions here, they're varied. The vast majority, over 95%, I believe, are Buddhist. It's very much a Buddhist country now. There's also communities of Islamic areas within towns and cities. There's some Christianity, some proselytizing going on. I guess there must be a very, very small Hindu population. I don't see many Hindus here. So it's they get on so well too. It's no one blinks so much. One of the things I really like about Cambodia is maybe it's the Buddhism or whatever, but everyone goes side by side. There's no pointing and there's no discrimination at all. Not that I've ever seen.
I did that. So Ashley, you've been to Cambodia. Have you not before?
I have been. I've been to Angkor Wat and Phnom Penh.
Yes.
Yes.
You didn't go to the garbage dump.
Did you go to the garbage dump, Ashley?
I don't think I went to this garbage dump, but I do.
Nobody did.
I know what you're speaking about, and I have seen things like this, and I understand the feeling of we must do something about this. And so some of my questions are about when you're going about setting up these nonprofit organizations, what is that like? Are you building relationships with people who are already running organizations? Are you coming up with ideas that you think should happen? And are you having conversations and people are like, oh, we don't really know about that, but we're willing to try that? But could you walk us through what that's like in terms of setting up a social organization on the ground?
I mean, the plan was when I went back to Los Angeles, I'd send a good chunk of my salary over there to Phnom Penh so we could expand the programs. I had a really terrific young woman back then, 21 years ago, and she's terrific at the operations, logistics, government relations, getting all the licenses, registration, compliance together. And so we worked side by side for a long time. However, it was never meant to be a charity. By the time I'd moved there a year later, I sold my house. I sold everything in LA. There's nothing left there in order to run the charity on my own money. So I never thought I would ever have to fundraise. There was no tax registration back then, no tax exempt. I was just going to run it on my own money. And the idea was, and I did the numbers, I could run it in effectively in perpetuity, more than 20 years, for the money I had from selling my house and boat and cars, provided we never went above 85 students in the program, because some were in residence back then. We don't have residents anymore, and there's transportation. It was a whole complex thing, but it worked so well. And I don't know why I didn't think of this when I moved over there, but be on the garbage dump, their child would come up and say, can you get me into school? And this would be child number 87, 92. Like, you can't say no. Well, I certainly couldn't say no. And so we expanded out, and didn't take long before we went from, goodness, 80 to 200 to 400. It was a matter of 2 years. So that was when the charity was registered. I did try and seek out other organizations in the area who I hope we better partner with. And partly because I had a lot of good resources. I had a good deal of money and was able to set up some very small medical care. I wanted to help out, but back then there wasn't much coordination. People were always very suspicious, and I got accused one stage of being trying to steal their market share, trying to steal their children away or something.
Wow.
It was a strange mentality, but it's not. I think it's pervasive worldwide.
Yeah,
they're the people's source of income when they're running these organizations. And it was a really sharp learning curve. For the first few years, I thought I knew all the answers. I went in there with my own sense of entitlement. Thought I could, if they just listened to me and I put these structures together, it would work better. Get frustrated because people were not sending the child to school, or they would continue to drink. And I had well, it was a bit of cultural humiliation over the next few years until I realized that I had no understanding of how people were living. I needed to stop talking, start listening, have a sense of empathy. If a mother's not sending the child to school, it's not empirically wrong. It might be empirically wrong, but if you take that position, it's not going to change anything. You're just going to be up against a wall. So learning to listen to the people there. I had no vision. I just wanted to get the children off the garbage dump.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was pretty straightforward back then. All the issues came because of that position I took, that position of I knew what was right. And I began to realize, I mean, you would see children were absent from school a lot and occasionally drop out, end up back at the garbage dump. And I think that was my big wake-up call. I thought everything was going to be great. It was going to be straightforward. I spent probably 5, 6, 7 years understanding what the barriers were to keep the children in education and putting in place solutions to them. Now, the first one, which seems obvious now, is that once the child's in school, they're no longer earning money for the family. So the child comes to school and his or her siblings are going hungry. They can't pay the rent, or they're falling into debt. So we put a plan in place which still exists today, and that's to make sure the parents are even. So every month, if the child's got good attendance, they get a bag of rice, a sizable bag, perfect attendance, they get an even bigger one. And we had very, very basic medical care. We had a doctor or two coming in twice a week. So that helped get the child in school. The next part was the medical side. Children had to stay home and look after sick parents, grandparents, or siblings. They had no way to get to hospitals or doctors. So we set up a very basic medical service. So those family members could get treated. The next step, I think, was children had to stay home to look after young siblings and toddlers while the parents worked. And so that ended up being a kindergarten where the parents could leave the children there. We had really good trained childcare workers while the parents went to work and the child went to school. And it went one after the next after the next. There were so many. One, of course, was a lot of people had no place to live. They're living on top of the garbage dump. And we have a really good association with the Vancouver organization. We've built nearly 600 houses over there, really basic homes. But wow, they are
still
the structure, the schools, there's gardens, there's running water, and they're very much sought after by the families.
I bet.
And so there was one solution after the next went out there. Debt was a big one. People who borrowed money without collateral were paying 10% per month, 20% per month. So if they'd borrowed, say, $200 to help with medical costs, they could be paying back $30, $40 a month. And that's one person's salary. And so we had a refinancing program which churned over. It was a small amount of money, but boy, the debts weren't that big.
Yeah.
And the one that I find one of the most proud of, as I was saying, the parents today didn't get much exposure to family values or structures, traditions, heritage, even superstitions, because they were pulled from the family. So we have what we call the granny program. We have 96 grannies. It's open to men and women, but we're predominantly a female community down there. And so these grannies are taken care of. They get a stipend every week. They get a bag of rice. And our older students, 14 plus, they're responsible in a group of 3 or so to check up on the grandmother, see if she has enough water, if there's any obvious medical conditions, she's got any issues she wants to talk to the kids about, and they'll do the report. They're very good. But then encourage the grandmothers to talk about the good days, how things used to be pre-Pol Pot. What were the traditions? Be the storytellers. Talk about the games you used to play. Encourage them to understand their own heritage, all the things of wisdom, even superstitions, what Cambodia used to be like. And I think it's a beautiful thing. That's the granny program. So we have about think we have 96, 97 in the main granny program. We call it the Wisdom Granny Program. Yeah. There's another secondary granny program for those who drink, gamble, and misbehave. We still need to support them.
Yes.
But the Wisdom Grannies are the ones at the top tier. It's a fabulous program. They go everywhere. They've been traveling around Angkor Wat to the beaches, to various temples. Wonderful bunch.
Yeah, and grannies being they don't have to be grandmothers, right? This is a larger term. Like in the U.S., it might be like aunties, or we might use that here or something. It's a larger term, grannies.
Yeah, right? Communities here. Everyone, is a community raising a child. If there's a child crying, if there's a baby crying, a child will mostly pick it up. Nearly always the girls, and they'll take care of it. And 90% of the time, it's not their own sibling. The grandmothers are grandmothers to everyone.
Right.
The grandmothers have the priority on the housing, and so they're the primary foster parents for children that have no place to go, have no place to live. Parents have gone, parents have died in jail, or just so badly substance abuse they can't care for them.
Well, that was going to be my question there, a bit of a follow-up, which is, you're doing so much on the ground with feeding, with housing, with education.
Yes.
And obviously you mentioned earlier the sort of generational trauma, which is beyond immense and in the soil and deeper. And of course, there's obvious correlations to substance abuse, alcohol and probably other substances too. I know a lot of times countries across Southeast Asia take a really hard line on drugs coming in or sort of entering in. So I'm just sort of curious politically what how draconian are the drug laws, or do they exist at all? Number one. And then number two, being that you're taking on so much, is taking on the issue of substance abuse something that you either directly take on or have to tangentially deal with? So yes, what's happening in terms of how the government itself deals with drugs, specifically in your area? What does that look like? And then you personally, do you have to deal with substance abuse within the larger community that you help and serve?
Every day, even yesterday afternoon. Yeah, the government's got very progressive views. It's similar to America. People that are using drugs are seen as being the victims. They need help. There's a lot of education about not using drugs. If someone is, then the police will put them into a rehab area. It's get them into rehab. That can be 1 month to 3 months. Okay. We occasionally have issues with drug users, those who are substance abuse and are violent at home, or basically violent at home is the main thing, in which case we'll contact the provincial police. They'll come and talk to the father, do a urine test. If he's positive, they go off to rehab. But I don't get too involved in that. But no, I'd say there's a lot of people using, it's a mixture of meth and a few other drugs in there. That's the primary drug of choice. We have an AA, believe it or not, we have an AA meeting, I think probably the only one in the country. That's been fairly successful. Right. And I don't want to be defeatist. I don't know an effective way to get people to stop using the methamphetamine.
Yeah, interesting. And certainly once they've dabbled, not to put it lightly, but
yes.
Preventative measures is a whole different story than somebody who's already been sort of engaging with that particular substance. It's wildly addicting, et cetera. Ashley, what's going on? Go ahead, Scott. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I was going to say that one of the issues is even where there's a number of drug users, they're not selling, but the problem is it starts to become normalized. People will try it because all the friends are, especially young males, and it's not. Before there wasn't a great deal of understanding. The people were going out scavenging, and one of these mothers got hold of me, and she was praising her husband, said that he was working twice as hard. Instead of spending 9-10 hours in the garbage dump, he'd be there for 15 hours. He wasn't drinking as much alcohol, and he was no longer, he wasn't violent in any way. And I was amazed. I was like, what sort of SSRI was this? And he brought it out as methamphetamine.
Wow.
Now, what do you say to her? What do you say to her to tell her how dangerous that is? It's going to get worse. She said, oh, no, it'll all be good. And we're earning more money. He's seen the young guys who were working 15 hours a day, and that was his medicine. She thought it was pharmaceutical product.
Yeah.
Those things are, it's tragic. I mean, he's passed away since. Father just went skidding downwards. It's very hard to deal with.
Yeah.
And the rehab too, I can understand. I got a better understanding of why rehab's so difficult, because the guys will go in there, but they're coming back to the same area with the same problems and the same level of poverty and the same friends who'll be encouraging him. It's a very dark situation. Very cognizant of how difficult it must be to give up.
Yeah. Wild. Yeah. This notion that, meth is contextualized as a performance enhancing drug, so to speak.
Yeah.
And,
and everyone's doing it. Everyone's doing it.
Yeah. Everyone's
like
doing it. Yeah. Is there, maybe it shouldn't be contextualized exactly like this, in like a more sort of Western paradigm or something like that, or this is all over the world, but do you see like a sort of gang activity sometimes getting people onto drugs, young men especially, is connected to sort of a sort of gang?
Not so much, no. No, I don't see so much of that going on. And because we're so enmeshed in the community, I think we would hear about that. But again, if all your friends are doing it, that's enough. You don't need gangs to get people onto it.
No doubt.
We've known some of the younger children who've been on it, starting as young as 12 years old. They were the cases that really concerned me in the early days. And it was basically because I think similar to the US, those under 14 can't be charged with a crime, so they make nice, safe delivery people, and instead of getting money, they get paid in drugs.
Wow.
But that was short-lived. Stomped that out real quick.
Wow.
Yeah, and the government here, I have really good relations with the government. I think we've got a lot of good people running the country.
Well, that's good to hear.
I think it's progressive. Yeah. Well, look at the not to compare ourselves to America over here, but the Prime Minister is Hun Manet. He's first Cambodian graduate of West Point Officers Academy, PhD in economics. I think he's a sort of leader we need. I think it's what Cambodia needs right now in a way. He's very balanced, very fair, I think, and I think he's the future. But
I mean, that's
into political areas. People would disagree fervently because they've had a lot of problems here. The Thai army's invaded on the west side. They're still holding some ground there. There's a huge scandal here. The scam operation here was huge. So they're clamping down on that, arresting people.
Yeah.
It didn't really, wasn't conducive to the investors coming in here. So there's a bit of work to do there as well.
Yeah.
Well, Scott, what do you think made you dig in? Meaning, a lot of people get motivated about a social problem, and they might start a nonprofit, or they might create some sort of initiative, and they may address it on a surface level, and that may be all they do, which is still really amazing, but they never get to the root of the problem. And it's clear with what you're doing and the story and just the work that you've done that you continue to get to the root of the problem, and not just with like the way you're thinking about how things are done, but just with how you approach showing up for other people and the stories that you're telling. So where does that come from? Is that something you've always been doing?
It's a good question. I don't know. I never had a philanthropic streak. I was always very cynical about charities, even when I was on a significant salary. I had, I think, fairly classic prejudices against most charities. One, of course, is you don't know where the money's going. You see the salaries of some of the heads of organizations, $1 million, $3 million, and that was a turn-off. Also, that it wasn't my problem. That's the one I think a lot of people have. It's other side of the world. I can't help. If I give all my money, there'll still be children suffering around the world. And also the view that it was things the government should do, and blaming the victims, well, if the government did this or the parents did that, this wouldn't exist. It's not up to me. But I found that standing on the garbage dump that day, and this girl came up, Nick was her name. Nick is her name. When someone says, "Can you get me into school?" that negates all of those things. It isn't someone else's problem. I can help. I know where the money's going. It's my money. It's there. It's very spontaneous. And as you said before, there is a responsibility there. I originally thought about, well, the plan was to stay in Los Angeles, send money over there, but things were going terribly wrong. Things I really had trouble processing, would keep me awake at night. And when I'd met children there and I'd committed that to be picked up by a three-wheel taxi, the tuk-tuks, and the guy didn't turn up. And I didn't find out until a month later, and it broke my heart thinking of those children were there. They'd been on a promise. I promised them to get them into school, and they'd gone. And then realizing that unless I was based there, unless I was talking to the parents and the grandparents, then I wouldn't be able to do the job well. And, not to sell the charity, but the outcomes we have in terms of education and medical, they're phenomenal. But that wouldn't exist unless it was bottom up, talking to grandmothers and mothers and children, and not accepting everything, but being able to listen at least. And that's, each of the programs you have in place. We've got kids coming in every day, 1,700 across these areas. Our absentee rates are just under 3%. That's less than the US. And these kids are in foster families, have to get their own food, get their own books, and that is phenomenal. And it's because I put aside my own sense of cultural superiority and listened. And it took me 10, 11 years to get the programs together, but it runs so well now. And you can't do that if I was based in Los Angeles. I couldn't have done that.
Yeah. Scott, you've obviously been dealing with things that are hyper specific to that country and that region,
Yes.
and down to that garbage heap, if you will.
Yes. Yeah.
But I wonder, maybe 12 years to get it going, about another sort of decade, roughly, a little bit less maybe, to watch it go and sort of grow. And as Ashley said, start to maybe really dig in to the root, and, probably requires, years and years of digging to hit it and get it, but it seems like now you're getting after it. But maybe this model, I think about, I see video, images, stories, articles, reports coming out of different places in India, the list goes on, where the problem is not exactly identical. But if you ran the genome, it's 93.5% identical. It might look like, the genus and species, but it's close. You know what I mean? So I'm just wondering how often you, number one, maybe remotely lend your expertise to other organizations on the ground in other countries and cities, but are you also potentially thinking about using this model that you've developed or this infrastructure that you've built and sort of, to some degree, exporting it, or even finding yourself on the ground in other places? I'm sure you're so deeply, spiritually, physically on the ground, enmeshed. You're
exhausted and tired. And so emotionally invested.
Yeah.
But we have a project underway that's mapping the model, called the Arbor, as in tree, ARBOR, the Arbor project, which is looking at how all the programs work together, proof of concept on them. And the model is complex. There's, I think, 42 different, 6 major programs and a number of different projects, which off to the side, whether it's maternal care, we have nursery programs, but it has to be modular. It's something that, when it's done, would like to present to, say, the Gates Foundation. In the early days, I thought what I was doing was so wonderful and great, and wrote to the Gates Foundation a proposal. And I'm told that Bill himself looked at it back then, but they didn't fund it because they look at models that are either running at a regional, national, regional level, and generally can be scaled up worldwide. At the time I wasn't happy, but it makes sense. If you're trying to eradicate smallpox, then you have to have a program that is across the world, national program. It's the most cost-effective way of doing it. It's the most thorough. However, since then, if anything is based in community, social level, it has to be done in community and social level. There's so many benefits to that. And things like education, I firmly believe it should be replicated in the community as opposed to scaling up across the country. First of all, it's far more cost effective to bring the locals into it, have them help decide on things. There's also, and it happened with USAID, I saw there, where maternal care is a good example. We have a maternal care program, and motivation was two terrible tragedies for mothers died after birth. And so we started the program in 2010. And since implementation, we've never lost a mother. There's, I think, 1,800 women who are considered to be high risk births. And USAID came down to examine it, and it's so ingrained in the community. The grandmothers involved, their youth leadership are checking up. We have the fathers coming in for pre-postnatal. The only direct financial component is the medical clinic when they're giving birth, fallback for complicated births. But USAID thought it was wonderful, but they couldn't scale it. You know, they would want to take it to a regional level, and that would mean, you know, senior vice president of prenatal nutrition. And it's not that way.
Yeah.
And of course, when USAID doesn't exist, then the program doesn't exist. Where we've got it in the community is so inexpensive to run. And I really feel like you have to have that. The knowledge, the training has to be held by the locals. They should be talking about it, helping each other. It's a beautiful, one of my favorite programs, how it all came about. You know, the kits we deliver for the mothers, the care they're given all sorts of things. Give them a bit of pride in the baby. The father's participating.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think you've got to replicate. I really think that anything community-based, social-based has to be in the community, and it's far more effective and sustainable if it's replicated as opposed to trying to take it across a national level with, you know, hierarchies and different tiers of executives. Just leave it to the community, start it up, train them.
Yeah, that's a great answer, Scott. Thanks so much for sort of clarifying there. And I know you earlier mentioned the Gates Foundation. You just mentioned USAID. Yeah. I might be stealing the question from Ashley a little bit here. She might be thinking about this too. But,
yes,
you know, again, at your comfortability level, you know, there's a lot of back and forth depending where you are on the political aisle, how informed you are. Let's say you're in America and you're looking at, you know, Doge erase USAID to a large degree, if not entirely. Some people say this is, you know, directly, responsible for deaths in the thousands in various, ops across the world. And other people say, no, we were throwing money away, or blah, blah, blah. This was ineffective, or it was a front for something else, or whatever. You know, different excuses as to why they're not losing sleep that USAID is gone or whatever, right? So there are some opposing camps, and you know, opinions sort of vary. I don't think anybody really wants to see lives lost or programs dissipate that directly lead to the starvation of individuals. Maybe some psychos do, and we know like psychos and sociopaths exist. You know, we do. All right, I'm not going off the handle, Scott. Don't worry. You know, but from your perspective, you know, liaising or sort of engaging with these, you know, big NGOs or sort of orgs, or, you know, even specifically USAID. And I know you gave us a little already. You may have answered a small portion, but just to push you a little further, what was that like for you working with these like big international agencies? Do you feel like they could be effective? It sounds like to some degree they were in good faith looking at the org and doing their best to make good faith decisions about whether or not they could get more deeply involved or bring it to scale, or et cetera. What was your experience with orgs like that?
They do terrific work. They are saving lives, and it was the management, at least the ones I dealt with, were terrific. They really were out there on the field. They would listen. You know, the two camps you mentioned about those who didn't care and it was useless, as wasteful, and those that felt like lives would be lost, they're not mutually exclusive. I think, you know, when the new administration stepped in, it would have been a wonderful sense of leadership to look at USAID and reinvent it. You know, what the US does is remarkable, with a number of programs, and from medical, women's rights, food especially, looking after vaccinations, looking after those with HIV, tuberculosis, to reinvent it. My concern was it was very very moribund. It was very complex, a lot of bureaucracy, and unfortunately, it was top down. So here were the policies, and you couldn't ever vary from them. It could have been such a smaller and nimble and very adaptive organization, and instead it was just mocked and destroyed in the most terrible way.
Yeah.
I thought it was just appalling, to be honest, just how people seem to take joy in getting rid of the people who'd worked there and worked in the field, and 20 years with USAID, and all of a sudden you don't have vaccinations out there, and tuberculosis is not being researched like it should. The radio stations like Radio Free Asia, it was an amazing service because many of the countries are so repressed you don't get much free media, and they had the radio broadcast which to listen to. It was so cost effective. It was a small number, but just to dispatch that with a certain amount of malicious joy, I think that was very wrong.
Yeah, thanks for that answer.
Such a great opportunity to do something remarkable. I've got to say that one of the things that should be looked at, the programs stopped when USAID was closed, but why aren't other countries doing that? Why aren't the European Union stepping in to do the same? Instead of throwing up their hands, USAID was doing all the heavy lifting. I don't think people really appreciate that. It was a great program. I'd like other countries, instead of being aghast, step up, look after the same vaccinations, do the research into tuberculosis, which is a big one for me here because Cambodia is sort of a hotbed of, the center of the universe in terms of antibiotic resistant diseases, illnesses, because people are mixing different malaria tablets, for example. And there was a good study into that, and that was closed down. And it was such a small amount of money. All that research just gone, stopped. Yeah. But someone else should pick it up. Yeah. The regional partners, Japan, China, European Union.
Yeah.
It shouldn't all be put onto the US.
Yeah. And, first of all, thank you so much for the sort of bridging the nuance outside of these binary constructs that can be very restricting, imprisoning. So thank you for acknowledging this sort of complexity. Go ahead, Scott.
It was such an opportunity. Under Democrats, they wouldn't touch it. It was sacred, and it was very expensive to run. I felt like there was far too many people, and when budgets were cut, the operations would stay the same. The programs that were being funded would be cut. It needed to be leaner. And of course, the other thing is that when Republicans are there, it just becomes a slash and burn. It was such a great opportunity to really lead the world in a lean and locally focused aid program.
Yeah. Scott, one of the big ideologies behind or above or permeating good standing, which we have here in the title, one thing I like to say a lot is vast, which is, we can hold two things in our head at the same time, without going to pieces. And I know just as an American, it's like, why can't we ever just do the best thing? Why does it have to be this or why does it have to be that? Can we please just make logical, non-emotional decisions? We can be passionate, and we can move quickly. But why can't we just do the thing correctly? What the hell? Also, real quick, and I'm partially joking, but I'm also being serious, which is, you were, as you put it, a very high level exec and very effective. I think all these movies you were involved in, I thought were awesome for the most part. You're dealing with serious logistics. You're dealing with sort of international business, your locations, budgets, each film is at least 1,500 people, right? So anyway, you're obviously doing and have been doing this amazing op on the ground. But, when I hear you say, somebody should have really whip USAID into shape, I'm like, I feel like I'm staring at the guy who could do that, So anyway, do you feel like sometimes there is a part of you, even though you're doing this great work on the ground and you're doing so much, do you ever have a little voice in your own ear that goes, I don't know, maybe I can kind of have somebody kind of really be day to day on the ground there. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I could step into that for the European Union. Maybe I can step into that in an extra governmental way that liaises with a sort of wider international apparatus. And I do that, You know, like, are you that guy in a way? Is that kind of ironic in a way, or frustrating even for you maybe sometimes?
You fantasize about how it would run USAID, basically how it could be. Um, Clearly, it's not going to happen. Amongst many other things, there's not a lot of dialogue going on now. To be able to do something, to make a real change, you'd have to have people being able to talk to each other, different points of view, even sometimes extreme points of view. People really have to have the ability to listen to come up with a good solution. And it's pretty toxic out there right now.
Yeah. So Scott, let's just get like a couple numbers, and I feel like people can get this all on your site, but you're talking about hundreds of thousands of people sort of directly served by your organization. Give us some sort of numbers. Again, we can kind of find these, but for our listeners, our viewers,
the ones I'm most proud of is our education program, where these kids come from the worst backgrounds. The main criteria for acceptance is you cannot access education without our intervention. Either the parents aren't around, don't have the money, whatever it may be, and occasionally if you're not going to stay in school. But with that beginning, we have 70% of those that join the program will finish with a degree, going to college or university. Wow. Last year, 98% of the students passed high school graduation. 75% were female, and they're going on to university. And they're studying some very impressive majors. Looking at goodness, one of the young women now, they just had got a degree in networking, and she's doing AI. She's big on the AI side, and that's what we're very proud of. Those the vast numbers who are going to university. The majority of our students. In the medical clinic, we treat roughly 25,000 people a year now. The cost per treatment's tiny. It's embarrassingly low. I think we should implement it in the US. We can treat a person, both diagnostic, X-rays, and supply their medicine for under $20 per person per treatment.
Yeah.
It's actually about 18, I think, running $18, and that's everything. And so those sort of things work so well. And again, you have to be on the ground to do that. We have some very generous foundations in the US which are helping out. I think one of the best charities, you may have heard of it, Direct Research International. I think they're based in Santa Barbara, and they collect the pharmaceutical companies will send them excess stock or potentially expired, and they send it out to a large number of their registered medical hospitals around the world. And you bid in there, you see what you want. In our case, a lot of antibiotics and hypertension, and if it's available, they'll ship it and pay all the costs. It's remarkable, very low key, but I love those guys. Hey, that was my shout out.
Thank you for putting them on our radar, and we'll shout them out too.
Yeah, Direct Research in Santa Barbara, good people there. So yeah, those sort of numbers, maternal care, never having lost a mother. The other thing I'm really proud of is our ability to adapt to a critical situation, because we're all based on the ground, all the management's here. One example was a really terrible area. I just did a recent video on it, where the vast majority of people there are substance abusing users, and there was a lot of newborns and very young babies and toddlers, and they're in terrible state. The parents would often wander off, leave them. They had bad nutrition, of course. Some were affected by mothers using drugs during pregnancy. And we created, you have to hear me out there, we built what we call a drop-in nursery. It took 3 days and $2,000. We had a room nearby. We moved some of our early education and nutritionists over there every day. In terms of drop-in, we normally have kids registered. They come in, they apply the register and get to the program. But given the conditions there, we encourage the mothers there to drop their babies off. They're welcome to stay with the babies throughout the day. They get good feed, they're washed, they're clean, good clothes, and the parents generally come and pick them up at 3:30 or 4. Generally, not always. And it worked so well. Just the fact you can do that so quickly, and it got government compliance. So we got the sign off from them. Ministry of Health signed off. And it's not easy to do that when people are substance abuse. They're not very reliable. So people will go out there and find the children, find the mothers, maybe bring them in. At the end of the day, we have to go back with the child if it's safe. But those sort of programs, you have to be in a community-based organization, being able to adapt quickly and have the trust of the government here.
Yeah. So Scott, we're going to let you run kind of soon. Listen, for
USAID,
run to, well, I don't know, maybe it's something entirely new. Maybe something has to disappear for something better to emerge, right? I'm curious, are there people who are coming from outside the country, maybe coming from Europe or America, who have heard about you and want to get involved? Maybe they want to donate. Maybe they want to show up and volunteer. Is that something you want? Or you're like, I don't know. Tell us a little bit about that. How can people get involved philanthropically or
mostly
volunteering?
It's donations or in-kind giving. Donations, of course, financial donations. In-kind giving if you have access to, say, the medicines or capital equipment. We need a new ultrasound for a medical clinic. Those sort of things are very helpful. We have a strict policy on volunteers. Clearly, you have to go through the checklist with your own country to make sure there's no sex offences there. But the most important part is you have to be able to help train the local staff. If you're a doctor, say a pediatrician, you spend half the time treating children who are sick, but the other half you be upskilling the locals here, and that's where you get the real bang for the buck. The best return on investment than teaching 10, 12 doctors the most recent pediatric improvements, medicines, orthopedic surgeons have come out here and they go up to the local children's hospital. It's fabulous, Children's Surgical Center, and perform operations there all day. And in the evening, they go upstairs to the theatre where they're teaching orthopedic surgeons all the new techniques.
Wow.
I sent we had a wonderful board member who went up to the CSC and they worked him to death. He was cussing me by the end of the week. He's going from 7 a.m. till late at night. But what an amazing difference you can make.
I bet.
So there's those educators. There's one or two of our staff are expats or foreigners who come for a short period of time, who teaching English to the teachers mostly. But mostly it's all locals. We've got a terrific team.
That's so great to hear. Ashley, being that I'm sure Scott has to sort of get down to business out there, do you have another question? I have one more after you, Ashley. It's a little bit lighter, but what's going through your head to send Scott on his way, Ashley? You have anything to add here?
Yeah, Scott, have you incorporated any creativity programs into the education?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah. I haven't personally, but we have an arts team. One of the senior managers has an arts degree, and we have so much going on. Photography, painting. We have structures. What's it called? When they're fixed into places. Yeah, so really strong. We have one high school that is STEAM based, is science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics.
Yeah.
It's really they get into all forms. Not sure it's on the website, but very proud of the arts the kids get. Given the programs we have and the support for the families, there's nothing quite like it in the world. I just wish it could be done elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think the higher up you go and the more top down you get, the less effective and more expensive it all becomes. I don't know if you know of Charity Navigator. It's the largest independent evaluation service on charities.
Yep. And
it's real deal. They base it on IRS filings and transparency measures. That's a good place to go. I mean, not just for my organization, but any charity you're thinking about giving to.
Yeah, it's something that we've referenced before. We look at quite often. We don't only have this podcast, but Scott, we also just launched a mobile application, a web application, where we want to aid people who are doing sort of good work out there, not just being a sort of vampiric portal through which people would fund or something like that, but to get people more involved and bring more awareness and help them sort of create events or structures to plug in there. And it seems like Charity Navigator has created this huge network where they're very sort of trusted, and it's a great resource. And it's a resource we've looked at, and I think we've even planned on trying to sort of speak to them and work with them sort of directly too.
Great non-profits, and GuideStar are other two very good ones too.
No doubt. No doubt. All right. So
people do the research, I don't like when people get to where I was and being distrustful of charities. There's plenty of research. Easy to get to.
Well, we got to be vigilant, right? The U.S. just had a huge thing, out of Minnesota, and it creates a huge problem. And good standing is also about, is your nonprofit in good standing? Is your organization? Is your brand? This is important
over you as well. Where's the accountability lie? Where's the supervision? The proof of concepts is actually going. It's not rocket science. It's about to have those borders in place, having the limits and the oversight. Oversight and compliance is not that difficult to put in place.
Yeah. All right. So, Scott, give us a quick vision of what the rest of your day looks like there. It's probably like 12:15 a.m. or something. What do you got going on today? You don't have to give us your whole itinerary, but what are you looking forward to today?
Let's see.
What's stressing you out?
7:30 this morning, there was a call with our chairperson of our global board, just getting some guidance from him. Then there was giving out student awards, the first semester awards for our grade 3-4 students, meeting on HR. This afternoon, there's an operations meeting, senior ops, the 4 people who are basically running the operations on the ground here. After that, there's more student awards, and then I'm doing some video content, just thanking some of our bigger donors and smaller donors too. There's also a documentary underway. It's we're not financially, creatively involved, but documentary probably later this year, potentially Netflix, which is worth looking out for.
Great.
And I'm doing some interviews there.
Speaking of a busy day, and probably a busy day every day. But before I ask this sort of silly question that is a little movie related, I just do want to say, number one, thank you for coming on. I know you're a busy guy. I know you've laid out the narrative before, so sharing it with us and answering some of these questions, it means a lot to us. And we know you're doing great work on the ground, and we know you're inspiring to people. You're inspiring to us to make this big, bold leap is impressive and admirable. I have other adjectives and things to share there, but, so thank you so much for just doing the work you do there, and every day on the ground, in the hot molten lava, you know what I mean? All right. So
that's gone now. That closed down. It's further out. The other part of my day, which is every day, I go into the community in the early evenings, starting around 5:30 through about 7:30. Different areas, different communities, just meeting with the locals there. And after doing it for so many years, it's wonderful to be able to help and to understand.
All right. So here's my lame question, but you spent years doing these movies. Do you watch movies? Do you watch movies with folks on the ground, the students, the grannies? Do you get together and watch Titanic? Ashley and I, we rewatched Titanic the other night. It holds up.
It holds up. However, I think I'd tear my eyes out. I mean, I've seen it when it was being released 17 times.
Oh, okay.
I don't know how many languages. That's a long film too.
No doubt.
And all the premieres around Europe and film festivals. It started out in Japan, Tokyo Film Festival. It was a lot, 17 times.
You're beat by most young girls back in '97, though. They would say those are amateur numbers, Scott.
That's right.
And what about
to stay away?
Do you ever watch movies just generally? Do you pop?
No, not really. No. I don't. I'm not very focused. I think these days I'm a bit scattered in what I'm doing. Well, because there's so many dynamics going on, communities and fundraising and operations, and most of all the community issues some of the people are facing. I'm just so focused on that.
Yeah. You're focused on.
I don't think many of us can focus for more than 15 minutes these days.
But I want to return all the way back to being focused on changing a child's life and creating an alternate reality, not just for that one child, but for, you know, an exponential number of human beings, connecting to that sort of empathy and being focused on that. You know, that's an amazing thing to be focused on. I love movies, but, you know, Ashley and I especially have sort of built our own sort of small but growing apparatus that is built around that focus. You know, so you sharing that focus with us today is what it's all about, and we're just so grateful, man. I'm grateful for you being in the world doing the work too. So thank you. Now go get to work, Scott. Get out there. Get back in there.
Get back to work there. Yes.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Stay in touch with us. You know, we'll follow up down the road.
Will.
We appreciate you.
I'll send you a few videos to look at too.
We'd love that. We'd love that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck out there. Have fun.
Bye.
We'll see you.
Yeah. Stay safe.
Bye-bye.